But before you leave Nigeria, you have to ask yourself, what do you want? Do you just want to study abroad or you want to migrate?
Yeah.
There are two different things.
So, sorry, come again with the question. Do you just want to
Do
study
you do
abroad
you want to just study abroad or you want to migrate? You have to ask yourself that
yourself?
question from day one,
Hmm.
and that should guide your decision. What do you want to do? We should know that in the migration system of the world, education seems to be the easiest part. Or like, I don't want to use the word easiest per se, especially for the Western world. It's a way to filter quality people. Yeah, I don't want to put quality in good, but
Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the fourth episode of the Grind Path. I'm your host, I'm Olabisi Akande. And for those who are very new here, the Grind Path is a space, and the purpose of this space is for us to share experiences and to share learning of grinders. And who are the grinders? You are a grinder, I'm a grinder. And what do we mean by this grind? We are not celebrities. We are not, no, the way we say Nigerian parlance, like, oh, someone who has hammer. But we are able to draw inspiration from each other's stories because our stories are being related to one another. And because, we are grinding from one step to another, from one stage to another, and we are taking lessons, and these lessons are able to not only inspire others, but also even inspire us to remember how far we have come. And today I have a very, very interesting guest. The name of the guest is Abdulmujeeb Onawole. Our conversation today is actually navigating scholarship opportunities across three continents. And the guest I will be conversing with, because it's not really like an interview, it's a conversation. And our conversation is going to span across his journey from learning from Africa to Asia, Middle East in particular, GCC to be specific, and now finally in Australia. So we are going to talk about his personal journey. And he's someone who is very motivated. At the moment, he's a computational chemist. When he left Lautech, he was just a chemist. So right now, he's a computational chemist whose academic journey spans multiple countries and research areas. He completed his BTech in Lautech, just like I completed my BTech in mathematics in Lautech as well. We completed at the same time in 2011. So following this, he earned his master's degree in chemistry on a scholarship from a university in Saudi Arabia, completing his studies in 2017. He then worked as a research assistant at the Gas Processing Center in Qatar University until 2022, when he was awarded the scholarship for his PhD studies at the Institute for Molecular Bioscience, University of Queensland, Australia. So, Abdulmujeeb Onawole, welcome to the Grand Path. So let me ask you the most common question. It's not really a question, it's a mantra. Like, many people say school is a scam. For someone who has studied across three continents, school is a scam, in your opinion.
I would say there's no easy answer to that. I know people would expect that conventionally I should say it's not a scam, but of course education is not a scam. That's what I would say. But in terms of school, my thought process is the way things are changing. Try and get affordable education as if you can, like as cheap as possible, and just ensure it's quality. If you can get quality education at a very affordable price, I think it makes better sense than spending crazy amounts, because things change. You cannot really rely on that, and so that's why a lot of people feel that what's the point? I went to school, I spent this number of years, I spent this amount of money, and what's my return? So even at the end journey of all this, I got a master's, I got it. You have to look at the whole context. That's why I said there's no easy answer to that. Of course, I understand the frustration of people saying that, oh, I've gone through all this and is this the end? And I'll be realistic with my own personal journey. Even for many people that are okay, I'll get scholarship and everything. Kind of tell people you have to think of the end from the beginning. Realistically, we know there's a glut of PhDs, so it's not like sometimes you be like, okay, should I have changed career from the get-go, like maybe switch to something else from this? So as much as there are many opportunities, the reality is also there. But I hope at the end of this discussion, what we can say in terms of education or school, why especially for many of us from African countries, where rather than many of us finishing and doing something else entirely that is not even related to the whole academia that we spent decades doing masters, doing PhD, that we could say, okay, fine, we need to go back home and do this. Or there's a way that we can be where we are and really transform the continent positively. Then I would say, yeah, 100% for those of us going through this academia pathway, it's all worth it. But the reality is not like that. So not to waste much time on that, I would just summarize that in terms of education, this modern day, try to get quality education at the most affordable price. That way, whatever you eventually do at the end, you will not feel pain that, oh, I spent millions, I spent dollars, and I'm doing something that probably I just learned on YouTube and is what is bringing me money. I don't know if that makes sense. So,
Yeah, I get the point.
yeah,
I get
yeah.
the
So
point.
that's how I would.
Yeah. So in summary, if I get your point, it's all about like, why do you want to actually say maybe education is a scam? I know people don't often say education is a scam. It's often school that they mention. Thank you very much for pointing that out. Education is not a scam. I think the issue with school is often because there is like a kind of expectation mismatch. It's because what we always hear before was like study hard, work hard, get a job, and you get a life. But the moment we study hard, now there is no job. Now it looks like we have been scammed. But from your insight, try to make it as modest as possible. And in that case, I mean, looking at your own experience, you are able to have higher degrees, and this does not come cheap wherever it is. I mean, if we all look at the example of the United States, it's not cheap, right? It's pretty expensive. A lot of people are drowning in student debt or student loan. Now you are someone who have been able to like walk your way through all this by able to have affordable one when you could, and also be able to access scholarship. So I mean, that is actually very inspiring. Let's just start from the bachelors. So from the bachelors, from the beginning, did you actually plan it out that you are really interested in like studying till the highest level, maybe becoming a professor, or did you have that dream?
Yeah, yeah. I think right at that time, I think I kind of like to be in academia by default. Then, because I looked at it, I remember there was a time I went to, if you remember, Olusegun Oke Library in Lautech. There's this analytical chemistry book like you have. I can't remember the title, but at the beginning of each chapters, you had like background stories of chemists, and then I saw being in academia that okay, you might not be crazy rich, but then anything you wanted to do, afford it. And I think that was the standard for many people in academia, probably in the 80s and 70s. You might not be crazy rich, but if you are well respected, if you want to jump on a plane, go for a conference, it's easy. It's not the way they look at your, I say, go and bring your bank statement and say your salary is not even up to the visa at the embassy. But I kind of saw that. And also sometimes I looked at corporate greed. Sometimes when you look at some chemical companies and some of the things that happen. So I felt being in academia, I could be kind of saved from that. So I kind of wanted to be in academia, inspire others and the whole learning process and do research that I would like, not being compelled by whatever the industry is producing. Nevertheless, I think in my final year, the late Professor Abbas Olajire, so he did his sabbatical in one of these, maybe Shell or one of these oil companies. I think he taught us environmental chemistry then. And that like really brought a new light to it that, okay, fine, even if you're in academia, you could still really be doing well for the industry, like being a
That's
consultant.
true.
So he did his sabbatical in Shell, or I'm not sure, but one of the oil companies. And because normally when professors go for sabbatical, maybe they go to another university or anything. So that really was inspiring for me. Personally, like if you are looking at the sciences, chemistry was one of my least favorites. And many of us that did physics, chemistry, biology, probably they used to call us wounded medical doctors, wanted to study medicine and everything. And of course, even this medicine, come think of it now, I have kids. I look at it as some of these dreams are probably indirectly like ingrained by your parents, and maybe because they thought doctors then in the 80s and 90s, like it'll be like a worst case scenario, you open up your clinic, you are doing well and
There's a
everything.
lot of rep, a social rep.
As, yeah, social representation. So
Reputation, yeah.
stations, yeah, like being a medical doctor then and everything. So, but Lautech came and then grateful, but it was like my least favorite. So I remember in 100 level or so, Lautech being a state university, and then what they call Dugbe class. We have a lot of people. I don't know. You used to say that because if you compare like Lautech to other federal universities, then if you say, "Oh, how many of you are in chemistry and your set is only 300 and you're talking to somebody from Ife or UI, they might be like, is that your set or the whole faculty? And
Okay.
so when you have a large class, like they call it Dugbe class,
Oh,
just like
okay.
the Dugbe market in Ibadan, kind of. So I thought of it then that, okay, fine. When MEKO Lecture Theatre, the late Moshood Kashim Awabiola, so there's a lecture theatre in Laut, just at the entrance of the main
Yeah,
gate
of
to
course, it's a
Lautech,
very
that
popular
you
one.
have this, the popular named after him. So I thought of it that, okay, we are in chemistry, look how many we are in this hall. And I'm assuming other state universities, maybe like OSU, OOU rather, and everything. I'll be like, how many jobs here for how many chemical industries are in Nigeria that will even employ all of us and those before us? So I was really looking at that reality that, okay, fine. And so what I did was, maybe I would think I was in 200 or 300. That, okay, fine. What are my colleagues outside Nigeria doing chemistry? What are they learning? And so I stumbled upon computational chemistry.
The
So I knew
library.
about computational chemistry from my undergrad. Like, okay, fine. So this is a new field that we are doing simulations, atoms and everything, and using computers. It's not like you are going to lab and everything. So I started looking for softwares. A friend of mine went to secondary school together. He had gone to the US. He bought me my first chemistry software. I think it was a virtual chemistry lab that you could like had. So all these from undergrad, kind of like, okay, knew
In
that.
what level was that?
I think 200 level, I think. I was really like, and then, then browsing on a phone, we had WAP, memes, if you
All these WAP
remember those
settings.
days of,
Yeah.
so WAP settings and stuff like that. So those little using Symbian phones, I can't recall, a lot of things have changed in the last 20, 10 years or 15
10,
years.
15 years.
10, 15 years. So just Google like, okay, chemistry abroad, like USA, what are they doing? And so I came across computational chemistry. So what softwares do I need to like learn? So there's a popular software called Spartan and this for molecular modeling. Unfortunately, when I got to final year, and this is like sometimes you make some decisions that are you might feel they're insignificant, but they can really like plan your trajectory. So when I was shared into a project group, I think it was maybe more analytical, but I really love it. There was Professor Banjo Shemiri. It was really computational chemistry in Lautech, in chemistry department then. So I really wanted to work with him. And so like he had that software and everything. So I changed groups but then I was familiar with software to an extent that I downloaded the trial version. But in terms of studying abroad, that had been ingrained from probably primary school. My dad studied in the UK for his higher degree. So then I was naive. I thought probably study at Oxford or anything, but it was already ingrained in me that I want to go and study abroad too and everything. So I even think even before I got, because I did A levels, they used to call it HSC then in the 80s or so, high school certificates. But now it's called A levels, Cambridge A levels, and all stuff like that. So I did that. And I was looking even at some schools in the UK even before I got to undergrad. But to be sincere, I kind of advise families now. I think it makes better sense for if you're in Nigeria for kids to do their first degree in Nigeria. Like I said earlier, you want to look at education and spend the most affordable
Yeah.
amount. So I think it makes sense. Let them study first degree in Nigeria and
But
maybe
education
come.
is education still affordable in Nigeria today? I mean, I don't know. The last time I heard about Lautech now, maybe they are paying like 400,000.
Yeah. No matter that amount, I know it sounds crazy, but inflation happens and things are relative. I remember first year we were paying probably 11,000. If you remember, there was a big increase when we were going to 200 level,
Thousand. It was more,
40,000.
but we came down to
We
40,000.
came down 40,000, and then I think we did that till we graduated. But
Yeah.
that increment was quite large, and a lot of protests. And I
Yeah.
remember some people that were already like Professor Misbah that were paying 6,000 then, and maybe some people were like three. And then the late Professor Salahu, then they'll be like, oh, people can even, I don't know how true that is, owe school fees till they got to final year, but when they get a job and they're able to they can come and collect their certificates. I don't know how true that story is, but I heard that maybe the late Professor Lau was doing that for like people could continue. Because if you remember during our time too, some people during exam halls they couldn't pay school fees and they would come check and then tell them to leave exam halls. I
Yeah.
don't know if you remember some of these incidents.
Yeah.
And so when you look at school fees now, I know it's crazy, but on a global level, Nigeria is still affordable.
It's
I'm
still
not denying
affordable.
that it's not difficult for Nigerians. I'm not being insensitive, but on a global level, it's still cheap compared to what is on the global level. It's you cannot compare. But of course, in terms of Nigerian context, also it's also very expensive. So I do not deny that. But I think if there's a family that can afford spending taking a child to undergrad, maybe Canada, US for undergrad, it's okay. You can take the child to a very solid private school in Nigeria, and then plan for this. And I would mention why this is more affordable. You have to look at the end from the beginning.
Mm.
And so I think it makes better sense if you can afford, let the person go to a solid private school in Nigeria, have the necessary grades and everything to be able to get scholarship or whatever, or thrive better and then move. Number one, the person is able to grow because you are still in your formative years.
Yeah.
Even for those people that travel abroad at 40, 30 something, a lot of challenges they face in trying to adapt. So
Yeah.
you don't want that formative years. This person is just alone in a,
Struggling.
going abroad
Yeah.
has a lot of effect on you,
Yeah.
and then
True.
yeah, formative, it could really derail the child, like you, and you'd be like, and we spent so much money and we did this and we did that.
Yeah.
But
It's not
if he's
about
well
money.
formed to an extent undergrad, then I think it's a better way. So I agree that it's expensive back home, but on the global level, it's one of the
Yeah.
cheapest.
So, so that we can move from one continent to the other, right?
Yeah.
One thing I could pick so far from what you said was from the early years of your first degree, you were already almost kind of clear-headed in that you wanted to be a computational scientist, right?
Yes. 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 That's true.
And I actually think that is because you are someone who is able to think bigger than the circumstance in front of you. Just like you mentioned that while in school, you are not just looking like, okay, let's just do this and get out of it. But you are like, okay, if I am in Lautech with 300 other students studying this together, other universities across the country, now also think of other universities across the world. What are they learning? And I actually think that is a very powerful mindset to have when it comes. This is not just even only about academics, but many things in life. I think there's a way people say it today where they say like, think global, but act local.
Yeah.
Like let your thinking be global, but in your local area, try to give your best. And I actually think that's actually very helpful. And just like you mentioned, you were able to obtain a scholarship from Lautech and then you move on to Saudi Arabia. I know you still tell a bit about like how you got the scholarship, but
Yeah. Yeah.
the
Hopefully.
important thing, because especially as it's related to what you mentioned earlier about the cost of education in Nigeria, do you think the education you got, yes, the education is cheap compared to what you could get in other parts of the world? Was it qualitative enough? Do you think it prepared you? I mean, now that you now have to build on what you learned in Lautech. Do you think you got a qualitative education that is good enough as a foundation? One, I mean, to an extent, the education is good enough for you to obtain a scholarship, right? It's good enough to get a scholarship. But beyond just getting a scholarship and getting to the next level, do you think the education you got in Nigeria, do you think it was qualitative enough to help you to build on?
I would have mixed feelings about it. I'll be holistic, and I think a lot of people have tried to, like, this question is kind of common. I must put it on record. Like, I appreciate Nigeria for that. The education Nigeria gave me.
Mm.
Like, I appreciate Nigeria for that. I'm grateful to Nigeria for that.
Mm.
Yeah, quality, it might not be at par, but for the fact that the certificate I hold, I can use it to apply for something and get a better opportunity, and it's affordable. I remember somebody that finished from me said the amount he used to write the GRE exam, the GRE, it's a sum of all his old school fees from 100 level to 400. So one exam takes your old school fees. I know I can't say that for Lautech because state
Yeah.
universities are often more expensive, but at that level, I'm still grateful that I have a certificate that I can use to apply, and it's recognized. It was recognized in Saudi Arabia or Qatar University, and it was recognized in Australia. So I'm grateful for that. Now, in terms of quality, I know there's a lot to say about that, a lot you need to catch up with. So, of course, you are not at par, but I think in the last 10 years, there's a bridging gap. Even before I left Nigeria, I used to tell people that if you're in social sciences or you are in statistics or maths, with the internet, there shouldn't be much gap between you and somebody in the West.
Mm.
If you're not doing something that experimental like physics or something that you need to go to the lab, or we don't have an NMR, we don't have an electron microscopy, then I can understand that you are not those limitations. But if you are social sciences that they are reading this book in this thing, they are doing these skills,
You have
you can
access
go
to
to
it.
YouTube, you can download this book, try and catch up that gap. In 2012, when Daphne Kola and everything, they created Coursera. Even before I left for Saudi Arabia, I was among the early bets, like, okay, what are analytical chemistry courses to get a better foundation of whatever I had learned in Lautech, that these are even better methods of teaching. And you are learning from the best people from Brown University, Rice University, top professors. Then Coursera was like the only top massive open online course platform you had before you had EDX and all others. And even now YouTube too you have. So this is 2025. I'm talking of 2012 when Andrew Ng and Daphne Kola created Coursera. So as far back as then, so if you're in Nigeria now, the gap between you and somebody in the West, especially if you are doing a course that is not equipment
Or
intensive
practical
shouldn't be more
intensive. Yeah.
practical intensive. Yeah, practical intensive. That's the right word. Shouldn't be that wide like before.
Yeah.
So that quality, of course, I wouldn't say, because I've mentioned the limitations. Maybe pipette, you're using your mouth and then you get somewhere and the equipment. And so these challenges are there for people.
Yeah.
And I noticed this, and that's why I personally chose computational chemistry, such that that gap should not be large. For my undergraduate project, I was like, okay, if 1 plus 1 is 2 in Nigeria, it's 2 everywhere in the world. But if you are mixing a chemical and they say, oh, it's supposed to be under this temperature and condition,
Pressure.
and maybe there is no
And NEPA took
and
light.
maybe you put it on the hot plate and then NEPA took light, and your experiments, it's not going. So those are some of the challenges. So I appreciate Nigeria, like I said earlier, and I'm grateful, and I know we can do better. And I think a lot of universities, especially the private ones and some other, are trying to like bridge that gap. And I think the internet has like assisted in doing that a lot. So
Okay. So now let's move on. How did you move from Nigeria to Saudi Arabia?
yeah, so like I said, studying abroad had been on my mind, so I was already looking for school. But I'm not trying to be humble, like I'm an average student. I was just on the borderline to get a 2-1 and everything. So the first school I tried to apply, I was looking at being realistic. What can my parents afford? What was everything? So it was University Science Malaysia, USM. So I got an offer there. And then another thing that made it, a good number of professors in Lautech as at then were studying there. I remember even so it was like, a place I felt that, okay, my parents probably can afford the money for this. So I got that offer even before I went for service. But then during service, I was like, I got advice that, oh, you never know what will happen in future. Try and complete your service and everything. My other plan was, okay, fine. Like I said, my goal was, how can education get affordable? So I was thinking trying for the PTDF, but I got the scholarship with I got an offer with University of Strathclyde, Glasgow in Scotland. So my intention was, okay, fine. If I get the PTDF scholarship, I will tell them, okay, I already have this offer. So there's a school you can fund already. That I think that was the arrangement for the. So I got an interview stage for that, and then a few days before our POP, then the offer letter for KFUPM came about. And I remember a dear friend,
What is the university
Doctor
in Saudi Arabia?
in
Because of
Saudi
those who
Arabia.
might not know the
Yeah,
difference
yeah,
between, yeah.
yeah, Dr. Abbas Afalabi. I came back to Lautech after our 3 weeks orientation camp, and he just said, there's this scholarship, KFUPM, King Fahad University of Petroleum and Minerals. Just try it. So I looked at the requirement. They were asking for having a CGP of 3 on a scale of 4. So my final CGP in Lautech was 3.62, and if you try and put that on a scale of 4, that's 2.9. So I was like, I beg, I no qualify for this now. I know if you try. He said, just put in, and he said, after all, they're not asking for application fees.
Which is
So
very important
I
mindset to
just
have.
did that, like tried that, and so a few weeks before POP, I remember, I think that was 2012. I think we went for service 2012, 2013, right?
Yeah, correct.
I'm unsure. Anyway, a
Yeah,
few weeks
correct.
before our pass
Yeah,
period,
that's correct.
yeah, okay. I got the offer letter. So then they asked that, okay, do TOEFL and do GRE. And so you have some of it's like a provisional offer. And so I reached out to people that are known at past. So the next 1 year was to try and write these exams so that I could get scholarship. So I think sometimes you just need to try, especially if there's really no financial distinct, you never can tell.
They will not beat you. Just give
Yeah,
it a try.
exactly. They wouldn't beat you. So don't just try. But again, I feel that CGPA 3.62, I really feel that it's a miracle. When I tell people this story, they feel, oh, but 2.9 is close to 3 and everything. But I will say this, why I feel it's a miracle in that context, that um or like what will be. When I finished my masters in KFUPM, and so I applied for a PhD as a backup. I really did not wish to do my PhD in KFUPM, because KFUPM is quite intensive. It's an intense school because everybody there is on scholarship and most like first class, and so you have
You have
all
to
this.
keep proving yourself.
Yeah, crazy. And then you have relative grading. So it's not like A is 70 or even if they say A is 90, you can work towards that. But it depends on how many people, maybe you take a course. And then in KFPM, it's not like you have a master's program per se. When you are taking coursework, you have course mates. So you are doing a course and it's both master's and PhD students therein. And so the way they do the grading system is like, okay, if somebody scores in a class of 7, maybe 3 people score 98, 97, 96, and then somebody now goes to score 70, that person can end up with a C. because they will probably share A plus A within those three scores.
Ah,
And so you getting 70. So the relative grading is
that's a
kind of,
very
but if it's,
strenuous way to
yeah,
learn.
yeah. So it's very intense, very competitive. And so, but that aside, when I tried, so even in KFEPM too, like I said, I'm not being humble. I just like chemistry was my least favorite of the sciences, even as at secondary school level. And so I just struggled also. I was able to manage to get a 3 on a scale of 4. So I remember during the PhD interview, the person interviewing me said that, but in your undergrad, you did well. And then I thought that that means there's possibility that this person is in my undergrad CGPA and seeing 3.6 over 4. Because
Oh,
our CGPA is over 5.
was over 5 year.
5. So that like made me feel, even for the 3 years I spent in KFEPM, during that interview, I think that was during my second year, that maybe there was just this good mistake. I'm not saying we should but things like this happen, that your efforts are blessed when you are trying. Like I explained, I tried USM, I tried other places to try and get an offer. And so for him to mention, interviewer to mention that I did well in my undergrad, I really felt that probably they did not do that calculation to on a scale of 4, for him to say, but you did well in your undergrad. Because, of course, I didn't do well in my undergrad. Because if you take 3.62 over 5 on a scale of 4, it's 2.9.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. And now in my master's, I got maybe 3.1 over 4. And he's saying I didn't really do well in my master's compared to my undergrad. I don't know if I'm making sense there.
Yeah, I
What I mean is,
understand.
even my master's grade, 3.1 over 4, is much better than
What you had in your
2.9 over
first
4.
degree. Yeah.
Yeah, so Buddy is saying I did well in my undergrad. So maybe he was just looking at the 3.6 and assuming it's over 4 instead of over 5, which we use in Lautech. So, anyways, that's by the way, Darren. So I think that's how I really got the KFPM. So it's intense, and then, and
Without interrupting
again,
you, I think one thing from what you said, try to apply to a lot of places,
yeah,
a lot of things. There is a way I often tell myself this very simple principle. Let them tell you no. Don't make up a no on their behalf. So sometimes when you
exactly.
want to apply for things, you're like, but what if they said no? Have they said it? Push it. Apply
Push.
first. Wait until they tell you no. So long as it's not costing you money, they are not going to beat you or anything. Like always
Yeah,
try. Like always try. And let them tell you no. And you should also prepare your mind for receiving no's. I mean, we are men. Apart from academics and life and other things,
yeah,
even
in life.
getting a lady, you should be ready to accept a lot of no's, and that should not
No,
break
yeah,
you. You
in
should
life
be able
generally.
to go again. Good.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think a lot of these come with, and many of us start, moved out. And when you're abroad, the terms of confidence and everything. And I look back now, you cannot compare maybe kids growing up in the West, the confidence level, even what they tell you as a parent, and be like,
True.
can I even tell my dad and everything? But then I don't want us to be too hard on ourselves. I know it's a learning process. For many of us that are millennials, some people that were born in 2000 and above, or 99, might not understand. But if you grew up in that military era, you can understand why not being confident, not being bold was very important to survive. And those things affect your psyche. Like, you really need to, you don't, because you saw people being taken, you saw people, your parents be like, they are what it be, Mr.
Yeah.
So those things build up. But you can't compare to maybe you that you've just seen democracy from this thing. And you see, I can give references to even when some podcasts. I remember when I think Kenny of Kenny's Music or D one said when we were Repower then, and I think his interview with
Honest
his name
Bunch.
is
Honest Bunch podcast. Yeah.
no, he wasn't honest. This other guy that left he did Blood Diamonds. He has his own
Oh,
podcast too.
Teju Babyface.
Teju Babyface, yeah, and he was saying then maybe they were, and you could not even call the name of. We are in 2025. Okay, this podcast was maybe 2024, 20. He could still not call the name
Call out
of
the name.
the name. That fear was still, you could sense it there, and because they know what they saw, and we, even though we're young, then we too, we know what we we saw. So I feel we shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, and I know many of us are learning and relearning and unlearning,
Yeah.
but hopefully our kids will be much better and at this confident stuff. And then generally, like you said, just push it out there, wait for
Yeah.
them to know. And so,
So long they will not beat
yeah,
you, they will not arrest you.
yeah,
Just
they would not.
I use that a lot for many things. Like I always give it to them. Let them tell me no. And in many cases, it really helps. In many cases, it really helps. Okay, so you already mentioned like some of the challenges in Saudi Arabia. And I mean, for someone who does not come from a very wealthy background that could bankroll all your academic desires and plans, I mean, the only tool that you have is to like keep applying yourself, keep,
Yeah,
getting better. I mean, letting every stage, like doing well enough in every stage such that it could open the door to another stage.
exactly. Like you have to, you know, keep trying pushing it out there, and also like look at what they are looking for. I think I cannot deny that because of the access to information, the competition is much like tougher than it was back then.
Mm.
And so I think I would still say relatively compared, kind of lucky. Even now, I know if you finish the first class, I cannot like confidently guarantee that you surely get the scholarship. There are other things you really need to do because the competition is like crazy. It's crazy competitive now, and people are more aware, and so those bars are set. And I hope we could discuss this. That okay, other things to build, like you really need to in terms of if you're in academia, you really need even as an undergrad, if you can start building your research profile, you know, try to get one or two papers out there, work
I
with
don't think it
people
should
with
be an if.
yeah, like it's crazy competitive now, even for masters or whatever scholarship. So I think it's something that it's essential that you try and do. Work with the right people. I know it might be tough because sometimes in Nigeria context, but I think I've seen some people in the same time. Even I know one guy. I think he really did. He had good support in undergrad, and he's in MIT now. And I think he's just from bachelor's to PhD direct. And this is really not a big deal. I know in Nigeria the way we take education, like from bachelor's just went to PhD, it's not really a big deal. Like here in Australia, too, you do a bachelor's, 3 degrees, 3-year program, first year, then the other year is your honors program, which is like you have some research experience, and then you do a PhD. The masters is more or less traditional, like if you really don't want to do a PhD,
Really?
so it's not like the way it is in Nigeria that you have to do a
You have to
masters
go
most
through all
places
this.
and then do a PhD. The masters is not. I look at it, I would say it's not a traditional degree. Like if you're in academia, then just bachelor. You want to be in academia, so you do bachelor's and you move to PhD. If you cannot finish the PhD program, and that's the way the US system does, then they can compensate you with a master's. Like because some of all these courses you are doing, it's the same. Like I said in KFPM, you are taking courses together with PhD students. So the difference is that maybe your research and then they have to do a comprehensive exam because the GCC follows the US system. They copied the US this thing. So you could also do this. And I know some people even in recent time too that from their
By
bachelor's in
GCC
Nigeria,
here, you actually meant the Gulf
well, make
countries.
the Gulf
So,
Gulf countries, so UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar,
yeah,
Oman,
Kuwait.
Kuwait.
Yeah.
So many of them, even for their higher education, they copied the US system. But I'm saying whether the US system or the Australia or UK system, the master's degree is not really like a traditional. If you want to be in academia, if you have what it takes, you can apply for a PhD direct from your bachelor's. You don't have to don't feel that the master's is compulsory for you. It's
I
not
used to
a
think that is
requirement
very
per se. No,
compulsory.
the master's you could move from. And I know people that even though they're here, they're from Nigeria, from their Nigerian bachelor's, and they came here to Australia for a PhD degree. So, but
Interesting.
if you have a master's, it can be another advantage for you depending on what you have. That maybe you've increased your research experience. So you need to be realistic with yourself. If you don't really have a lot of research experience there, it's just like you are shooting for the stars and then you fall on the
Mm.
moon. You can say, okay, fine, what really makes sense that to do. So, but what I'm saying is that I know people really like it's yeah, I acknowledge those that are able to get there. I'm not saying it's easy. So, but it's not like because sometimes it's the standard here. You finish a bachelor's, you go to a PhD. It's not so if you want to do like okay, I might say okay, for the job I'm getting, I just need a master's. I don't really need to do a PhD. So I just go for
Okay.
a master's. It's not but what we think mostly in Nigeria, and I think it was really like that in the past, is that
Oh my
after your
God.
bachelor's you have to do a master's and after master's you have to do a PhD.
But that is the way it is still is in Nigeria as of today. You still have to like go through all the hoops.
I know, but some of those things, and I think a lot of things comes from when competition increases, these barriers come into place. If you look at the history, then maybe then if you had your O levels, you could get into the university, you get to do fair. But maybe more people came, jam came, even those that first did poly jam, maybe then they didn't need poly jam, then maybe you couldn't make any of the universities, you could just take your WAEC result and go to any of the polytechnics then. But as more people too came in, it's, let's start polyjump, and they started before you had this UTME and everything. I'm just even saying far back as 80s, 90s, whichever
I
set.
understand. Yeah.
Look at post jam too. I think I was among those that first did post jam. It wasn't, it's just
It
like,
wasn't
oh, you
always
have more
there. So like,
competition, so let's create
ah,
another
I get,
filtering system.
I get.
And so I think that's just what
So
really
it's a kind
happened.
of consistent way of thinking. Like people often say that the highest paid job in the world are the types of job that not many people could do.
Yeah, of
Right.
course.
Like for example, when you say like, okay, doctors earn much, and like, okay,
Yeah,
how many people could really study to become a doctor
yeah,
compared to someone who is a teacher? I mean, in most countries, I believe doctors earn more than teachers. Of course, it's not like everywhere where teachers could barely afford a standard living or a basic living, to have a decent lifestyle. But I mean, you still have something, and it's often that the more you could do something that not many people could do, it's often
yeah,
that like the reward is often higher when you could do something that not many people could.
yeah. I think it's just the law of scarcity. If
Yeah,
what you know is scarce, you'll be very
then
valuable.
they'll be very
Yeah,
valuable. So the more you are so many, so and that's also a lesson for, I mean, all of us and very young people that when you are trying to learn anything or go into a program, if there are so many people, you have to like already raise the bar from your own side.
exactly.
Raise the
That's
bar from your own side.
that's very essential.
Okay, so now that was Saudi Arabia. You already mentioned you did not want to have your PhD in Saudi Arabia because
Yes. Yeah, so like I said, it was intense. I'm grateful like for the opportunity in KFUPM, I really learned a lot. I'm grateful I even survived, finishing there. And then there's an advantage if you study in the GCC or even in China, because some Nigerians to go to masters. I think if you don't go to a Western program directly, there's a high probability that you have chance. It's not a fact per se, but probably you can easily build your research profile if you're in the GCC compared to if you went to the West directly. And I've tried to sample people, even me, that's happening to me now. I cannot compare my productivity while I was in the GCC in terms of research output
it was
compared
pretty
to.
intense.
So yeah, besides that, that the program was pretty intense. Of course, your first 2 years is coursework, and then you have the research program. And I say I think I've been to people whereby you could your somebody's master's thesis could even be much more loaded than somebody else's PhD thesis. It just
Hmm.
depends. Supervision is a lot of things. Dynamics of supervisor student relationship, and a lot of things that might not be in your control as a student. So I don't really want to judge things like that. But of course, you might want to just make an informed decision in choosing a supervisor and stuff like that. But part of the reasons why I didn't want to stay in KFEPM was, like I said, you think of the end from the beginning.
Hmm.
This is a nice place to be like a stepping stone, and I'm grateful for a lot of the benefits therein. But I thought of it that okay, fine. After like even if I finish PhD here, what next? There's this uncertainty you get because the way the GCC is structured, there's no pathway to permanent residency and stuff like that. So and some incidents happened. Like I felt that okay, fine. If I'm even no more in the picture, would my family survive? Because you are looking for stability.
Exactly.
So that's why it depends. And I tell people, even when I got to KFPM, and people like, I said, fine, it's a nice man and everything. But before you leave Nigeria, you have to ask yourself, what do you want? Do you just want to study abroad or you want to migrate?
Yeah.
There are two different things.
So, sorry, come again with the question. Do you just want to
Do
study
you do
abroad?
you want to just study abroad or you want to migrate? You have to ask yourself that
Self.
question from day one.
Hmm.
And that should guide your decision. What do you want to do? We should know that in the migration system of the world, education seems to be the easiest part. Or like I don't want to use the word easiest per se, especially for the Western world. It's a way to filter quality people. Yeah, I don't want to put quality in code, but
I
to an
understand.
extent compared to
I mean,
to this way,
yeah,
yeah. So
you listen to
because
countries like US, you listen to people like Trump, and it's like, we don't just want anybody. We
body
want
exactly.
like
So
highly skilled. Maybe you don't want to use
I
the word quality, the highly skilled
quality, so
people.
skilled and everything. So especially for Western countries, because Western countries have a pathway for you to integrate. But I must put this on record. Like some people have, I don't want to use the word. They think the way the GC system is like, oh, there's no pathway to PR as if it's not a good thing. I think it's a good thing in the context of what they run, and if you are being realistic, that the way they are doing it is, I think, is one of the best ways you can. Firstly, you have to look at that. What's the population of the owners of the land. In most of them, they are minority. And so if there was a pathway to PR, that means in 50 years, they might become minorities in their own land. I don't know if I'm making sense there.
I understand.
Yeah, so you like that status quo would this thing. Secondly, the way they are designed, they have a consistent flow of young people, GCC, because you go there, you get a job, or you study, or you get a job. Maybe you're 65 and everything. They are like, you retire and you go home and the new set. And that's why issues like maybe nursing or age or care system cannot work in the GCC. Or even this way, people say, oh, you're coming to the West, I'll go and study nursing and everything because this is really reliable in the sense that you have an aging population in the West. So if you read medical related courses, you are very guaranteed
Sure,
that,
get
especially like
something.
nursing, you'll get
Yeah.
something. You cannot play that card in GCC because they don't have that aging population. Since outsiders make majority of the population, and once you are 65, 60
You
something,
want to
you
go back
retire and
home.
you go home. And let's be frank, if you are talking about wealth distribution in the world, I think the GCC template is one of the best ways to distribute wealth possibly.
Okay.
If you are, what I mean in that context is, if you know, oh, I cannot live in this country forever, I have to go back to Nigeria and everything, you are
Yeah.
also like preparing that, oh,
To leave.
what do you want to do back home? What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And so that brings like some sort of transfer of wealth that, okay, I've worked here and I'm transferring wealth back to my
Back home.
country in that context, back home. And like, oh, how do I make home better? You are really more concerned about that. So I think the way, what I'm saying is, when you look at things from this perspective, you get less angry at that, oh, how they are running, how they run things. Like, you're able to see it from that holistic view and say, okay, fine, this is why this is like this, and this is why this is not like this in the Western countries. I don't know if I'm making sense there.
Yeah, I get your point. I mean, if I may correct me if I'm wrong. So the point
Yeah.
now is try to like make the best of the opportunity you have. First, I think you mentioned about do you want to just study abroad or do you want to
Yeah,
migrate?
you want
It's
to
very
migrate. Yeah,
important. That should
it's very
inform.
important. Yeah,
And
that's
it's important to really understand like local dynamics wherever you want
exactly,
to migrate to, because that's
exactly.
always going to like play a part in whatever decision you take next. I understand.
Yeah, I get
So
your
don't
point.
digress.
Yeah,
Eventually you moved from you did not want to study anymore in Saudi Arabia, then you moved to Qatar, right?
yeah. So when and this is, you have to be realistic with yourself. Even though I was skeptical because of the problem there in KFPM again is, if you did your masters there, if you are going to do your PhD, you might have problem with coursework. What I mean, like I said, you have both masters and PhD program that when you take courses, both masters and PhD students take courses together. So, for instance, in chemistry, you've done some courses already. If you were to do PhD in chemistry, the minimum amount of courses required for you to do, you've done some at your master's program. You wouldn't be able to fulfill the requirement of the number of courses you're supposed to do for PhD because
You
it's
can't do
already in
them
your
again.
record that you've done them.
And you can't do
So
them
then you'll
again.
be forced to go and borrow courses that might not even be related to chemistry.
Related.
So they have this structure. I don't know if they've changed that because, of course, they revise some of these things that, okay, are there some loopholes? Maybe those that have done masters in the system might even be able to finish their PhD earlier because they fulfilled some course requirements already. So I don't know if that has changed, but a lot of changes are, for example, KFPM was usually a male-only university, and now it's
Okay.
mixed. Like now, females. I think in 2017 they made that change. So some of this, I know they revised some of this. So I don't really know the current state now,
Okay.
but these were some of the challenges. But I was fortunate, like before I left, before I graduated, even before my defense, rather, I'd gotten the Qatar University job offer. So, and this comes back to, I faced some challenges
And
in
it was
terms
easy
of,
to get the job, right? Like
it
with the
wasn't like easy, like this job was on recommendation that I applied. So, and that's
okay.
why sometimes you have to look at it. When you get a scholarship, you have to look at why people give you things. There's no free money anywhere.
Of course. If it's free, somebody is paying for it.
Somebody is paying for it. So there's no free money, or like there's always something behind the scenes. In the rankings of university, QS rankings and everything, you have what you call part of the rankings they do therein is okay, I think probably I should share this slide just to explain why people are giving scholarship, and then we can talk about
Okay, sure.
that.
You can
Let
start
me
with it.
just give me, okay. So I don't know if this is visible enough.
Yeah, it's visible, but you can put it what's it called? You can put it in the slide in the presentation format.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't know if I can still click on it when I'm sharing. Okay, I could do that here. Okay, is it better now?
Yeah, I can see it, but it's not in presentation. I
But it's
mean,
in presentation here on my screen.
okay, maybe you can just zoom in. I mean, I can
Okay,
see it,
maybe I
but
should zoom in. Maybe,
yeah, you can just zoom in.
okay. I chose three ranking systems: QS World Ranking, Times Higher Education, and Academic Ranking of World University. I know many times you see QS ranking is very popular and THE Times Higher. But part of the reasons why you are given a scholarship is this is the criteria they use. They look at research citations per faculty. That takes 20%. And they look at international student proportion. Them giving you scholarship or you being a part of or admission, at least that's 5% of ranking of a school. So if a school doesn't have international students, it's not good PR for the school. It's not good
Oh,
in ranking of the school. You need to.
okay.
So sometimes you can be lucky, and that's why scholarship is more than just I have a good grade, I have papers. There might be a lot of behind the scenes. If you are
Some
lucky that
external
maybe when you
factors
apply
beyond
external
just your own
factors,
personal one.
yeah,
Yeah.
behind just your own personal effort, and I think this is what probably you call luck or albarika as you see it, because I
Grace.
used to say that those things would come like opportunities would you have to be prepared for those opportunities. So for instance now, if a school is looking at that, oh, we don't have black female students in our, maybe they look at that and they are trying to improve that diversity. Of course, I'm not saying you would not meet you, of course, the academic requirements and everything, but they might just be looking at that demography and then give you, and consider. So if they look at minimum requirements that you need to have this CGPA, you need to have this number of publications, and then you have 3 or 4 people. Even if your CGPA is not as high as this thing, but you met the minimum requirement, they could consider because they want to fulfill some of this. This I've never sat at the committee, but some of these things, you can look at data and then try and deduce that okay, these are some of the things that are some external factors that are there. So, and this even helps you to look for scholarship. If you are a female, you see, oh, there's a trend of they are looking at PhD women in STEM, the opportunities. Those are the kind of scholarships you'll be looking for. Because you see, oh, there is a clamor for that, so that way competition would be less for you.
I
Like
understand.
when you are targeting those kind of, so you see some of those things, even some could even be targeted at disabled students that, oh, you are good and everything, but they want to improve diversity
Like
that way.
very
So,
diverse.
and so if one has a disability, that could also help. So I'm just saying some external factors that you never can tell what will happen. So this international student proportion is important, and then research citations by faculty.
Faculty.
And what this means is that, okay, what's the publication output and those papers that the faculty produces, what's the citation? So professors who are faculties would also need to employ students to do those jobs to lead to publications. So, and that is why these are part of like the reasons why, they give you the scholarship. And if you see the second slide, FEPM is ranked 101.
Okay.
Yeah. But there was a time in 2018, it
That it
dropped.
dropped.
2018 to 2020. I suspect what happened here because I remember I left 2017. But I think between 2016 and 20, or the year 2017, there was, I don't know what happened, but they could not admit students as they ought to.
Okay.
And so that effect showed in the years coming by, because if you don't have in a lab, maybe you don't have students coming in, going out. Like if I'm a PhD student, a master student, I know how to use this equipment or I know this process, and then they bring in a new student, I'm able to put the new student through. I can transfer that knowledge. Now, if you don't employ any new person, I now leave. Then you now bring someone new. That means all the troubleshooting, all the things I've learned, I'm not able to transfer because I'm no longer in the system. And then that would show, and that would affect publication output in terms of, oh, things. So I think probably, I suspect that gap that they couldn't admit students, the effect showed between
Like
2018 and
yeah.
2019.
Okay.
You know, so what
Interesting.
I'm just trying to say is that publication output is quite important and helps the ranking of universities. So they look at this, and so now it relates to me getting a job was from a course I took then. Even though I struggled in KFPM, like I said, average student in terms of some of those courses, the relative grading, I could like deduce that, okay, what research paper could come out from this. So my very first paper, and I'm so proud of this because my very first publication was in a journal titled Computational and Theoretical Chemistry. Um, that helped me because when I was going to get a job in Gas Processing Center, they were looking for a computational chemist, and so
Oh,
this is my very first paper. and it has 65 citations. And this paper, you can see the journal is titled Computational and Theoretical Chemistry.
Yeah.
For this paper, I did it with a close friend of mine. I received Dr. Kazim Sulaiman. He was a senior colleague in the same chemistry department. So we had this in 2016. But what I want to point out there is that, I knew my grades were not good enough, like were not competitive enough. And so even for PhDs and everything, I know like research articles are quite important. So I said I had to like try and build up my profile. Like, okay, fine. If my grades are just average, where can I be competitive? And so we took a course called corrosion. I can't remember, but it had corrosion in the name anyways. And from there, we just thought, okay, what research paper can we come up with? And I remember it was relatively easy then to try and meet. We had meetings and we wrote this paper. So when the job came, a professor from KFEPM transferred to Qatar University, and then he won a grant. He needed some things on corrosion. He was looking for a computational chemistry that could work on corrosion related science. So having this publication was like, oh, if you have a GitHub profile and they are looking for, you've done a project similar to what they want to hire.
Yeah, it's easier.
Sometimes publications to serve that purpose. So it was like, oh, having a publication on that, it was part of the factors like, okay, fine, this guy should be able to deliver if we give him jobs. I got the offer like that they would want me for the project. So I think I finished in June. But then I think around that time there was this Qatar blockade within the other GCCs.
I remember then. Yeah.
So I eventually came on a visit visa probably in December, and then, but this is where I really want, you have to really be careful in having a backup plan. So even as that, then I was trying to like, okay, I do not want to be, I don't know how to put it, but let me use the word. I do not want to be like stranded in Nigeria, like, okay, fine, let me still have an alternative that if this job doesn't pull through, can I still return to KFEPM to start a PhD? It's still better, like, you are still moving. Not that
I don't want to go back home.
Go back and like, and I must say, the GCC scholarship are one of the best scholarships. Like, they give you package, you could come home every year. You might not have savings in money, like financial money, and I'll probably talk about that probably these are part of the disadvantage. Like, if you study in the West, most times you do a part-time job, and that really puts you to develop skills. In the GCC, you might not necessarily be put, because the package is well taken care of, health and all those things. You don't really have to think of, you just study and everything. So some other things that you should learn in that age, like maybe driving, workplace culture of the country you are in, you might not experience that. If you study in the West, most likely you would do some side hustles, you would do, which would force you would probably learn how to drive.
It forces you out of your comfort zone.
Your comfort zone. Yeah. So the GCC like puts you in a comfort zone in terms of,
it puts you in a soft life.
Soft life in terms of some of those things. I'm
benefits.
not saying in terms but the benefits, you don't have to worry about health. You don't have to, because you are taking care of flights. You might not have, your stipend might just be okay for food and everything. Yeah. But it's not somewhere that somebody can like tax you from home and say, maybe you're working 3 jobs. Beg, I need 100K. Your stipend you are getting is already written, not permitted to work. There's nothing you can do. So you have that, but you come home and people would see that you say, I asked you for money, but you are coming home every year. How are you doing it? They don't know it's part of your package, your scholarship. But where do you get money for flight and everything? So these are some of the perks. But I think the stipends have increased in recent times, so I think they are doing much better. But going back to this, so due to the blockade and everything, anyways, I was able to get to Qatar in December, and I was on a visit visa, so it was more like a probation kind of stuff. And then they confirmed me, but I think early 2018, I think, and so I moved. But the job was more or less like the way a PhD is. It's a research assistant. You work on the grants, you write papers, and then it was interesting. Qatar is a small country though, and the experience, I think getting that job really also opened me to the other ways like people get to the GCC. I wasn't really aware that some people have to buy work visas, look for jobs, all these other ways because you just get a scholarship, they do visa for you, they do everything for you.
Yeah, so, you don't know the struggle other people.
You don't, those struggles, I wasn't, but when I got to Qatar, like those I first lived with, I could see, because Qatar was, they were going towards the World Cup, so a lot of people were there working in projects related to building stadiums, so you had a good number of Nigerians working in project management, safety, and everything pertaining to preparation for the World Cup. So I could meet that they'll be like, you're so lucky, university brought you bought visa, and many of them would just explain their stories, this and everything. I felt so I could really see the other side of the way people do.
It wasn't as quote unquote fortunate as coming as an academic.
So if you work with the government or an academic institution, kind of you have it way much easier. So and sometimes that comfort might really make you reluctant to this thing. So the job was more or less like, more or less as I'm doing PhD now, you do research on a project. Your boss, who is a professor, has a grant, and you have deliverables, and you solve research questions and everything.
So
But
you
as I then
from
also,
there,
yeah,
how many papers were you able to write there in Qatar?
there in Qatar, I think I would say for now probably it's part of my um, golden years. I can't remember how many in total, but I would say that's when I had probably the highest number of publications. I'm trying to look at my profile. If I look at
It's
from
okay.
2018 to
It's okay. I
2019,
mean, the only reason
but
I asked was just to know, like, were you able to fulfill your desire? What the job promised to offer.
yeah. The job, and I think the advantage I have is because also I'm a computational chemist. Sometimes if you're in experiments, there are some challenges. Maybe you order a chemical, you order this.
Yeah.
So, but being a computational chemist, you can just get to work if you have those things. So that helped me in having numbers. But I must say that even in those publications, I was already thinking of what next, because those jobs too are temporary in terms of the contracts. There's nobody that works in the GCC that has like a long-term, permanent, stable job. Like I said, most likely people work till late 60s, and you have to
Go back.
retire, go back to your home country. You cannot stay. So then most of the time, then I used to remember that where do I want to move to? For this thing. So I was looking at USA, Canada, and Australia. So, like I said, you going back to the question that do you want to migrate or do you just want to study abroad? You really need to ask yourself. So now I have a family, I have kids. Those things also change your dynamics.
You want
Your
stability.
freedom of rotation when you are single
Yeah.
changes once you have a partner. Once you have to factor a lot of things.
Yeah.
So I remember I used to go to Cora, check like opportunities, looking at Canada, looking at USA, looking at Australia. But a part of me, of course, as at that time, people, you could try maybe any of the express entry to Canada and just getting the job. But a part of me was feeling that, okay, fine, if I get PR directly, a part of me, would I really want, would I feel a bit, this, because I know the reality that there's a lot of PhDs globally. Like, so it's not like you finished a PhD, you are short of a job in academia. I'm very well aware that there's, the supply is more than demand. I'm very much, even as I'm currently doing a PhD now, I'm very well aware about that. But like I said, I was thinking stability for the family, for this thing.
Yeah.
So in the USA, I looked at it that, okay, fine, time to citizenship is a bit long. It's not that clear. But then the advantages of the USA are like it's the number one largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
And that probably upon getting a child, the child could get citizenship by birth. But
Yeah.
the challenges for me, the cons then was that your spouse cannot work as a student in the distance. So I got a PhD.
Where in that
Collaboration.
place?
Yeah,
Okay.
your spouse can't work as a student.
Okay.
Your spouse can't work. So the PhD takes longer if you are doing average of 5 to 6 years or 5 to 7 thereabout. Especially for STEM courses, engineering you might be lucky to finish maybe 4 years if you really have like a good this thing. Number one part of why it's long is because you do coursework for probably your first 2 years. But then for STEM courses, I think also because the way the PhD in the US is designed is part of the way your scholarship is designed, you are a graduate assistant or graduate teaching assistant, is that you teach undergrad lab. So sometimes, it's like, I don't want to use the word cheap labor, but if you stay longer in the program, of course, you'll be doing teaching duties to teach the undergrad. So your program could take that long especially if you are doing natural science, physics, chemistry, biology, and be that. So like I'm not talking from first-hand experience. I'm like talking of people because you have a lot of KFPM alumni across the world. So just like ask people when trying to make an informed decision, and you also look at their trajectory, what's really happening, how long is this person spending in this program. So I looked at it that there wasn't a clear pathway to PR, not like the way the NIB and all these
What's an
EB2
IB?
NIW are clearer now. Even if you look at people like Michael Taiwo, I think he just got the citizenship last year. And he left in his 20s for the US. He went for a PhD direct, if I'm not mistaken. Maybe from your time to green card to citizenship is also a longer, like maybe another 5 years. Some countries they take your whole duration from there. So you have to factor all these things. And why I'm saying this is, it's not as if like citizenship or PR is everything. I remember there was a Nature article explaining the importance of having this stability. Even as an academic, you want to go for a conference, you really want to have something that you can just jump on a plane and meet with people. But
People
if they're
from
like, you have to go to the visa embassy, and I
all the
experienced
time.
this. I remember in Qatar, they sent me for a training to Poland. And so I had to, even because Qatar is a small country, it's even good. Like, you don't have to travel long distance. So I went to the Polish embassy and, submit your bank statement and all these things. But if you have like a passport that doesn't need that, you can just jump on a plane and go where
I
you want
just
to. And
go
some people
through.
will try that and maybe they are not able to make those connections to get higher. Moreover, even there are some jobs that are security conscious. If you are not a PR or a
A
citizen, you
resident or
cannot get those,
citizen, you
or
don't have
you cannot
access.
get those jobs.
Yeah.
So that's why I said you really need to ask yourself about some of these things, that you want to migrate or do you want to just study abroad.
Yeah.
So this is the US. Like, I thought coursework and then medical care cost. Looking at Canada, the pathway was clearer. Canada does is one of the few countries that still does citizenship by birth, but also they also have a longer PhD route because you do coursework also, and also the weather, like it's kind of cold.
Like,
So Australia,
not is
among the
kind
three
of cold.
countries, yeah,
It's so
it's cold.
cold.
So US, Canada, Australia. Australia was my top. The advantage of Australia is, okay, yeah, the pathway is relatively clearer compared to the USA. It might not be as good as Canada, but things are changing now. I don't want to really get into politics of that, but at least as at the
Yeah.
time when I was making this
Let's
decision,
just focus on the Australia
yeah,
part. So now, I
Australia.
mean, you chose Australia because you think
Australia,
it's
so
better for you.
it's kind of clearer than the USA in terms of pathway to PR and citizenship. The duration you stay as a student also counts. Once you get PR, they just look at it that, okay, fine, you spend 1 year if you spend 4 years inside. So it's not like, oh, the time from PR to citizenship, they will count a fresh number of days. I think the US does that. I don't know if I'm making sense. Like in the
I don't really
US,
know much about the US system.
yeah, if you get a PR green card, you have to wait another 5 years to citizenship. In Australia, once you get a permanent residency, the rule to citizenship is that you should have been a resident for 4 years.
Okay.
So even the time you're a PhD student, they will count that time too.
Okay.
So you will get the citizenship earlier. Like when somebody in US might be spending 9 years
So
because maybe he
you
spent four or
basically get
five
it
years as a
faster.
student, you might just spend six or so because the time as a student. Also, in Australia, there's no coursework, so you have a shorter time. So the PhD is usually like 3 and a half, 4 years if you are lucky, at most 4 years max, right? And yeah, your spouse can work. And also, there's some kind of related, like Queensland, the weather is more like Nigeria. It's
Okay.
tropical and everything, so no snow.
Nice.
Yeah, there's some parts that the snow falls, maybe the southern part. So these were part of the reasons like Australia was my go-to. So I got the offer to Australia. I think I had the interview probably in 2019, but COVID hit. So COVID hit, we got the visa probably 2021, but I couldn't come in, and then they shut the borders for 2 years. But I
Oh,
kept following up with
that must
my
have been a long wait.
advisors here. So I kept following up with my advisors here, COVID, the disruption COVID caused. Moreover, again, what I'm really doing for my PhD was something I thought that, okay, fine, even if this academia route doesn't work, I'm grateful for what I'm working on, because it's related to AI. So I thought that, okay, even if I have to switch, like I will do, it wouldn't be so new to me if I have to switch careers and everything. So I'm using AI to solve the antimicrobial resistance crisis. So we have that problem. Antibiotics are not working as before. So trying to use explainable artificial intelligence in drug discovery. So, but then part of the reason why I really thought that, okay, fine, I really want to use this PhD period, that okay, fine, even if I finish, if I have to switch role career, it should be relatively easy. So like I said, you really need to look at that, those things from the beginning. If you want to migrate from the get-go, chasing scholarships might not be like your top
Priority.
state priority. Like if migration is it's this thing, but if you feel like, okay, I want to migrate, I want to combine academia, and this was probably my initial that, okay, academia, I'm really into it, like I really wish for that. But the reality therein is that, like I said, there's a big supply problem for PhD. And the where the solution can be, because we have a lot of people, and I see this on social media, everybody's like, okay, these are the scholarships, these are, but you really need to think about the end from the beginning. A lot of people, I know people that have crazy profiles that are better than professors, but they've not been able to get a permanent job in academia. But I assume that, if we can, and why many of them cannot come back home to African countries is that even their stipend is probably higher than what a professor gets home. But I
Yeah.
kind of tell people that, money is more than numbers. You might be in a
True.
place like, that probably you're getting 100K per year, But in that 100K, you pay for your rent, you pay for everything,
Which
and
K?
maybe some
100K dollars or
100,000 Australian dollars, or
Okay.
just think even
It's better
100,000
to clarify.
USD. Let's even
Yeah.
say that like you're getting 100 or
Yeah.
Canadian dollars or whatever. Let's use those countries as this thing
Mm.
as a yardstick. But if somebody says, okay, they are paying you 50,000 somewhere else, and you have paid for an official residence, you are not paying rent, maybe you have education allowance and you have to do that math. You can't just say because they are paying you 100K
Already just
somewhere,
move.
take you
Yeah.
have to like really do that math and
Yeah.
see. You might even save more with the 50K. But
Yeah.
what I'm trying to get at is this, that we can go back, and just to round off, like trying to come to a close
Yeah.
on all this, is that a lot of things that we do in the research we do, many of us have done a lot for the countries we've gone to do scholarship,
Mm-hmm.
that we've studied. Maybe we've done analysis. You see some people's thesis, something on Australian rock analysis, or maybe even Australian disease, that we've not even replicated those research back home.
Back.
And when you look at the crisis that would happen, even many seminars I attend in the IMB, I'm just like, it seems as if Africa is a lot of disasters, time bomb waiting to happen. That these diseases
What's
projection.
IMBA? What do you mean by IMBA?
Oh, sorry, my center where I'm doing my PhD, Institute for Molecular Biosciences. So when they are
Okay.
projecting, when people present and they're like, okay, if we don't treat this disease, like antimicrobial resistance now, if we don't, it's estimated like millions of people that will die by 2050 if we don't find new antibiotics, because
Biotics.
people have really misused it. Back home in Nigeria, people just go to pharmacy and we call them
I
chemists and
remember
just
I
order
used to
you
buy Septrain. Like anytime
Septrin,
I have sore throat,
which
just buy
which
Septrain.
which is not right. You don't just use, this is misuse of the drugs, and so we've helped those, we've made those drugs like the bugs to develop resistance to that. But what I'm saying is that there are some projects we can do that even probably even these big research institutes like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and everything, that they would really prefer to give the money to African researchers.
Mm.
But are they skilled enough for that?
To do,
So the African researchers that can do that is those of us that have traveled
mm,
abroad and be trained, and then maybe there's a way that we can work closely with those at home
mm.
to be able to, like, because they'll be like, okay, this person knows how things are done because he has both the
He has
experience from
experience.
outside and he has the local knowledge. So I hope that in the future, but it's important for those things to fly. People that study abroad, finish a PhD, need to get jobs in academia, and those at home to have to be willing to like work and not assume that so you don't have this cooperation sometimes, and boy is needed to make, because then you can apply for grants together and you can come back home. I remember the late Paus Adesomi, he used to come to Nigeria frequently and
Often, yeah.
do a lot of these things. So I wish that in STEM too we're able to do that. That probably some of us abroad are in good positions in academia, and then we are able to write grants to food and agriculture organization and solve some of African problem, because you have the global expertise and then you have the local knowledge, and you can work closely with them and say, okay, fine, we want this grant, and the money really comes to Africa. Because it's somehow here in Australia, you see, I know there are some grants, people working on malaria, because they're like Australia is kind of tropical, they have that challenge also. But imagine that some of those funds we should be at
Should
the
have it at
forefront in
home.
Nigeria,
Yeah.
doing
Maybe
some
some
of those
of those
things.
are some of the things that alumni associations of universities could maybe leverage. If alumni associations could leverage their members who are in diaspora and find a way to work with those
To
who are
work
back
together
home.
and work with,
I mean,
yeah.
it's important that we solve our own problems. Thank you so much. You've actually said a lot, and I honestly believe that I learned a lot from this, because some things for me before were just assumptions. And yeah, thank you for clarifying that. I believe this is going to help anyone who listens to it, especially those who are students or those who are fresh graduates and who are planning to Japa. I mean, whether we like it or not, Japa is a phenomenon
Is
as
a
of today.
phenomenon.
Yeah, and you want to say
Thank you
something?
for having me, Olabisi. Thank you so much. Yeah, and it's good what you are doing this, at least to encourage others from our
Yeah,
ordinary lives,
yeah.
that people could learn one or two things.
Yeah, and I believe from everything we have mentioned, going back to the first question I asked, that is, yeah, where you mentioned education is not a scam, and we should always try to see education beyond just what somebody wants to offer me, but thinking bigger than the scope ahead of you, and things like that. And you also mentioned that you are the kind of role model in person of late Professor Olajire Abbas of blessed memory. Are you closer to getting to where your role model was?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a role model per se. It's just like in terms of the way he did the when he taught us environmental chemistry in my final year. Like I like the unconventional approach he took from the sabbatical, that rather than go to another school that he worked in industry, and I could really see that effect when he taught us. And I think this is very important back home too. If I know it's not easy because sometimes some of us look at the problems from afar. Some of our lecturers too wish to maybe work, do their sabbatical at
Yeah.
Dangote Cement or Dangote this thing, but I think in Nigeria, the many of us have this ego problem. Even a gate man will be like, ah, this is my office, and I think sometimes it affects the way we are able to bond. To make things move forward in terms of this thing. Some are able to do that, but of course, if you look at Lautech as a whole, despite Professor Abbas's death, is still one of those that, in terms of ranking, in terms of scholarly contribution, is one of the pillars that still hold Lautech, because the way citations work is people still cite your work, and so it contributes to the ranking of this thing. And I think, for the universities to still be benefiting from his scholarly work even after his death, I think, and these are very useful things. So I hope to also, like, create to also have that kind of
You'll be cited.
contribution yeah, to academia and to even individuals. Like, okay, fine, you're able to contribute positively in one way or the other. So that
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and I really
thank you.
appreciate it. I believe this is not going to be the end of this conversation, and I hope that when you are invited next time, maybe to talk about like, choosing between the West or going to the GCC. I mean, since you already have experience across continents, and like
Yeah,
this could actually help someone trying to make a decision on these topics. Okay, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest
thank
of the
you
day.
so much,
Yeah,
Olabisi.
bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.